and welcome back. And this week, as promised, I will be talking about the Riot reform system. And just to warn you now that this is probably going to be a little bit longer video because I'm going to kind of mash two topics together, and you'll see what I mean later on in the video. But I'm just warning you now that it might be a little bit longer, so I appreciate if you do watch the whole thing, thank you now. And if you don't watch the whole thing, I understand. But let's start from the beginning with the tribunal system and the reform system itself. The tribunal system has been down. If you're new to League of Legends, you have no idea what this is. Well, pretty much you go in and you would be level 30, and then Riot would approve you. You can log in the website, and you can look at these chat logs and look at the reports of people who've reported people. You won't see the name of the reporter, or the reported, I should say. You'd read the logs, however many they gave you, 1 through 5 usually, and if not, maybe more. And then you would see the reports and see if it fits. The reports fit, if they're punishable or not. So you would either punish or pardon. Now, Riot would reward you people if you got so many right. And what do I mean by that? If you got so many guesses right, or what you thought should be done with this person, and what the community thought, majority of the community, you would actually be rewarded with IP. Now, this seems appealing, but it easily got abused and easily was not taken seriously. What do I mean by that? Well, we had a 90% punishment rate when we had this system, and this was a community-based system because anybody could do it. Some people did take it seriously, and thank you for those that actually did, went through and read the logs and took this actually as a job, because some people enjoyed reading the logs and enjoyed doing that. And it is funny at times, we have those videos now that, you see this funny little chat logs and that little robotic voice. But ultimately, it was not the best system. It could have been better. And Riot said, hey, we're going to take it down. Now it's been down for a year. Now it's been down for a year, and it's got maintenance, and I don't think it's going to come back, honestly. I don't think you're ever going to see that come back, because at this point now, Riot has come more of an automatic system. It has more of a coding in their system to fight and battle many things. Where did it first start off? Well, firstly and foremost, we had, of course, the racism, the negativity, pretty much your toxic behavior, quote-unquote toxic behavior of what you consider toxic, racism or death threats, just all kind of bad sportsmanlike conduct, whatever the case may be. That was being punished now. And how they took that into punishment was you pretty much got a chat ban. And a chat ban, you can only type so many times within the game. You can type as much inside the lobby, be like, hey, I want ADC, blah, 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 blah. And then in the game, you got probably, I think it's 3 to 5 lines, and then you couldn't chat anymore throughout the thing. Now, seems good. This seems like a good idea because sometimes it's hard to communicate with your teammates. But then again, you can communicate still through pings, which were, implemented later on throughout the system. And it was ultimately a good idea. Also, they also implemented the AFK system. People going AFK, the Leave Buster would get you. What the Leave Buster would do, first things first, you would get this warning that says, hey, you've left a game, this game's over, you cannot leave the game in the future. This is kind of like your warning. Type I agree, and then in the future, if you keep doing it, you're actually going to get a Q penalty. What do I mean by that? Q penalty is if you AFK'd so many times in a game or left a game so many times, they'd give you a Q penalty, and on top of waiting for just a match to start, you'd have to wait an extra 10 minutes prior to that. So they would give you a cooldown, and sometimes if the dodge, something happened and there's a dodge or whatnot, you'd have to wait another 10 minutes, and it's painful. I've had friends, because it also affects your group, because you invite somebody in and they have this penalty and you all have to wait. It's not just like they have to wait. We all have to wait. So it is painful waiting that extra 10 minutes and kind of, I think, stop that behavior, hopefully. I mean, some people just have to leave and, you got to do what you got to do, though. But so those were the two first implemented systems, and they were doing well. I mean, you focus on the behavior. The statistics seem kind of vague and kind of off-put, because when they were first released, it said the toxic behavior, there's only like 1 to 2% that were actually toxic. Now it kind of makes more sense now that we're looking at it, because when you first read this article, and I think I talked about this in the past, is that you're talking about 1 to 2% that you're focusing on, and the racism, the negative comments, race, like I said, sexual orientation, if it be like, oh, this, that, just anything negative that you can attack and be nasty and rude about. They ultimately said, hey, there's only 2% of those people. And it kind of makes sense now. It kind of makes sense that yes, that was 2%. Maybe it was a little skewed. Maybe it seemed a little bit more than that. And maybe it was, right? But ultimately, it was just focusing on that. It wasn't focusing on the, the feeders and the trolls and the auto picks and yada yada yada, which I don't think ultimately we're ever going to get rid of completely. Why do I say that? Is because how will a system, and it's going to be kind of scary if a system can detect if you're trolling, auto lock a pick, auto pick a lock, and it just now you're getting into more of a gray area, which kind of leads me into the next thing. Riot Lyte has released their next step of this reform system. The reform system just detected its first intentional feeder in League of Legends. We'll let it learn some more before we start the bans. And then he released on May 29th that we're so close to getting the reform system to start handing out bans for extreme intentional feeding. Might get it by Monday. So they're moving forward. They're adding more code. They're adding more steps to this electronic behavior. And it's sad because we're never going to probably see the tribunal again. And that's probably the biggest thing about this whole thing is that it's sad and it sucks that the tribunal system's down for maintenance, and I'm sure you already saw it on screen once, but it'll be down below that you could just click the link and it'll tell you it's in maintenance. It's probably never going to come back. I mean, there's no point to it coming back or being reformed one way or another to have a better system because the computer's doing it all. You don't need to go look at the chat logs. You don't need to go look at, this, that, or the other and decide if they're punished or not. Because ultimately, the computer is taking care of it. They throw out the bans, depending what it be, if it be a chat ban or a 14-day suspension, whatever the case may be, right? So, let's move forward to that. And the system I wanted to talk about a little bit was the intentional feeding. So that specific tweet there from Riot Lyte is kind of getting me worried because there's no context of what the system really looks for and what the system kind of focuses on. And I think that goes for everything. How many chat bans and how many bans do we need to finally be like, hey, this guy is more toxic than we thought he was, or how many reports does it take to get them chat banned, or how many reports does it take for them to have more into the chat ban while they're on the chat ban and they type something else, how many days are added to that, kind of like what is the system and the ideas behind this. So say you got 5 reports of a chat ban and they were kind of neutral responses. I mean, some of them were like, yeah, he was kind of toxic there, but ultimately these were not so toxic, kind of neutral gray. Could have been better, but not the worst, but he wasn't really talking, so hey. Same thing with intentional feeding. What is intentional feeding? Is that 0 and 7? Is that 0 and 10? How many times do you have to die in a game to be considered intentional feeding? And then on top of that, if somebody that reports you intentionally feeding says, hey, you're intentionally feeding, they think you're intentionally feeding. Maybe you were actually trying, but hey, you ended up with 0 and 7, 0 and 8, and boom, you get reported. So now you have a 14-day suspension. This is where it kind of gets kind of gray, kind of icky area, because I wanted to talk about chat bans, and I want to talk about, the real reform system. So the infamous XJ9 got banned because he was just really toxic, really bad behavior, and he's done a lot of things, and it's just not chat, right? But he's completely banned, not allowed on the server. Now there's people, and there's been posts that made it to the front page Reddit and elsewhere on the forums of League of Legends that says, hey, I am toxic. I understand that I'm toxic. I have a 2,000 game chat ban. I'm not going to get through this. Or, hey, I just got through with a 1,400 blah 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 chat ban. And hey, now I have another 3,000 games to go because I got banned again. And he can still play ranked. And this is a big thing here. The chat ban people can still play ranked. The intentionally feed people get banned from the server. Now, is that consistent punishment the way out? I'm not too sure. That's something we have to decide and something that we need to discuss, I think, because I don't think that intentionally feeding banned from the day, 14 days is a lot. I mean, intentionally feeding, ruining the game. Is that a fair punishment? Some would say yes, some would say no, maybe. And how much, like I said, you kind of got to see the numbers. What is the general idea of intentionally feeding, and how do they determine that? And how does the system determine that? Because it's all automatic now. Because if I click that button, hey, he was intentionally feeding, the system says, hey, he was intentionally feeding. And that's what I see is intentionally feeding, right? But you get this report for anybody. Maybe somebody just doesn't like you. If it being Diamond, you hear these stories all the time that there's specific people that always report you and always give you a hard time because it's such a small community and you always run into these people and you always queue with them, which leads me into the next thing. You queue with the same people when you report. And Riot Lyte has released that there's a little notification system that says, hey, you reported somebody, and here just letting you know that, hey, other people reported them and they'll be looking into his behavior. He or she will be looking into their behavior. Thank you for their report, right? It's a little notification system. This is also kind of a bad ordeal. Why do I say that? Is because, like I said, in the smaller and smaller elos that you go into, which are like in your higher elos, like Platinum, not so much Platinum, but more like Diamond, Master, and Challenger elos, you report somebody, and you've seen this time and time again. You report somebody and you see that, and you're like, hey, this guy's toxic, and I just played with this guy. You report him, and he ends up in your game, your next queue. And it sometimes may happen in lower elos, such as Gold, Silver, and Bronze, and even Platinum. But it's more unlikely because there's so many people in that elo. It's because you kind of get bottlenecked into the elo depending on how many people. And like I said, there's only so many people that are in the top of the top, right? So you play with them again, and now you're in an awkward situation because you reported him. You know he's been reported before by multiple people. And what happens if you didn't get a report? You didn't get that message saying, hey, this guy has been reported multiple times, blah blah blah. What happens if you didn't get that and you're in queue again? You're like, man, this guy was toxic. I have to play with him again. He's in another ranked game. I guess if he intentionally fed or he was rude and toxic and just toxic behavior, and I have to play another 14 or another game with him, which could last 35 to 40 minutes. I'm gonna have to dodge. And see, that's kind of why I don't like the notification system on that aspect. I think it's a good idea. I know you want to feel more important. You feel more like self-worth that, hey, my report actually means something. It actually is getting looked into. Hey, it's acknowledged. That's great. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, you get that report and you're like, man, other people have reported him. Look at, I got that notification right here. And then you clear up for that next rank game and you're like, holy cow, this guy's got reported and still not in trouble, and I'm in the queue with him. Now I either have to dodge, put up with him, and hopefully he doesn't troll, and there's already that tension from last game, because some people, it's hard for them to lose last game. A lot of people, pro players, tell you, hey, you just got to throw that last game out the window and keep going. And sometimes it's really hard for people to do that, so the tension's still there, and there's a lot to that. So besides the notification system, and now the intentional feeding, and what the system looks at that, we need some numbers, I think, and that's the big thing is like, hey, what do they consider about intentionally feeding? Would they, like I said, how many reports does it take until they get a 14-day ban? How are you going to show chat logs with that? Are you going to show them like their KDAs in games? Like, hey, this is what you were in these many games. And how many games does it take, like I said, to get you to that ban or suspension? And then also, back to the chat log thing, why do they get to play ranked? Do they get to play ranked because they're toxic behavior? Does that mean they ruin the game because they're toxic? And keep in mind what we consider toxic is racism, negative comments, bad game, GG, this person's what an asshole, blah blah blah. Just kind of attacking other people on their team or on the enemy team, and ultimately they get to play ranked still and have just a chat ban, and it only takes one time. I mean, they're offered what, five lines, 3 lines, and it only takes one line. Go, you're all assholes, blah 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 blah, right? And lo and behold. So the reform system, there's a few things I just want to kind of see, and I think we should all see. Like I said, the number system is a good thing because it's like, hey, what do you consider intentionally feeding, or what is the system itself? And then also, if when you put in a ticket to fight your report or fight your suspension or your chat ban or chat restriction, there's only so many people that can look at this. And I think this is where the tribunal system, I think, will shine. And maybe there's a possibility for the tribunal system to reopen to kind of reform, like say, hey, this player is reformed, or hey, this person got unfair punishment, right? Because the behavior system is not as big as many people in League of Legends. What do I mean by that? As simple as that, is that, hey, there's like 100,000 people playing League of Legends. I know there's a lot more, keep in mind, but we're just going to use 100,000. And Riot Lyte and his team are probably like maybe 200. We'll give them 200. Probably not even close to 200. Probably 50, maybe to 100 people that are looking at these logs, and they all have stacks and stacks and stacks of emails or of paper formed that says, "Hey, I don't shouldn't be punished. Hey, what is going on here?" And you have to go through this system, and it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, and I think that's another thing. And we see from time to time, again, all the time, breaching the front page of, like I said, Reddit or the forums that say, "Hey, I was unjustly banned. What the heck is this?" And a lot of times, Riot Lyte has come out and said, "Hey, our bot is not picking up the right chat, or the system's not picking up the right chat, and the chat that it uses is not correct. Here's some logs for you, yada yada yada." So I think ultimately it'd be a good idea to kind of push the tribunal in that system kind of forward. Give your players the chance to say, "Hey, these players were punished. Should they be punished, or should we actually punish them? Or hey, have they reformed?" Or kind of look at the reform system. Maybe make the tribunal system into like a reforming place where players can go and say, "Hey, this is your chance to kind of learn how to adapt to see how players have changed over time and see what you think. Maybe you don't want them back in your community, maybe you do, right? If it be a chat ban or intentionally feeding, yada yada yada." So ultimately, that's about the reform system. Now the second part of this, I'm going to mash together really quickly here, is the unfair punishment that Riot gives to its kind of unbalanced, I should say, not unfair, but unbalanced punishment it gives to its kind of Riot employees. And I'm not saying Riot employees like the casters and the people that work for Riot, but the employees that play their game and play for a profession. What I mean by that, I can go all the way back to like TSM, with TSM Reginald leaking out in Lustboy and saying, "Hey, where Lustboy's playing, blah 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 blah." And there's no rule for that. And I guess this is esports rule, and you can say that's a completely different system. But give me a second here. We can go back to that, or we can go back to the Corey thing with his house and MYM situation and all that jazz. But that's all in the past, right? I wanted to talk about this because this is specifically come up about Betsy, and I am a Gambit fan. And I'm not here to bash Betsy, and I'm not here to just down Betsy, but I've heard stories before. Hey, in higher diamonds that, diamonds that aren't streaming, and diamonds that seemed particularly nice in the game, and ho ha ha, no big deal, blah blah blah, were actually toxic. And I was like, well, I've never been diamond. I'm gold right now, I'll be honest. And I don't know, these are just stories I heard, rumors I heard, but I've heard players that were really rude when they're not streaming, and really rude when they're playing games, and can be kind of toxic. Now I don't know what they consider toxic, but ultimately, were they toxic? Well, lo and behold, Betsy came to the front page of Reddit. Lo and behold, gotta love Reddit, right? So Reddit comes up and says, "Hey, Betsy's trolling and being rude to these lower diamonds." And I was like, "Oh my God, no way! There's just no way. How many times do people have to learn to not do this, especially if you're a pro player, right?" So the chat logs were kind of released. This whole post was made. Betsy was kind of being toxic. He was intentionally feeding one lonely behold, and the system just got released for that. And also, you had Betsy being very rude and negative towards his teammates. If it be, like I said, "Fuck you, blah blah blah, this person's trash, blah 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 blah," right? And this post went on, and of course everybody was like, "Riot Lyte, oh my God, Riot Lyte, where are you? Can you release some things about this? Blah 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 blah." Not to be found. Not to be found. And why do I say he's not to be found? It's because lo and behold, another post I got up there, which was just a random person that was like, "Hey, I want to be where am I? Why am I toxic? This chat log is completely not right." And this is why I talked about this earlier, that the bot or the specific automated system that picks out the chat log that shows you, because it only gives you a splurb of your chats. It picks out a chat log that was not toxic at all, kind of nice behavior, or maybe he was just being too chatty, who knows, right? And then Riot Lyte comes along in this post and was like, "Hey, here's all your logs." But you didn't see anything about Betsy, and you didn't see anything about pro players that are toxic, and you break these summoner rules one way or another on, if it be in the game, just solo queuing one way or another, or if it be on another account. What do I mean by that? Well, going back, when Voyboy actually played for League of Legends, Voyboy and Pooksy were dating, and probably are still dating. I don't know. I don't keep up with all that social stuff. So Thank you. If you want, leave a comment. I know last time everybody's like, Vasili's still playing. Clearly you don't watch LPL. And I'm like, yeah, I don't. I don't have time. I try my best. Sorry. But anyway, so as you know, Pooski and Voyboy were dating. They would play League of Legends together, yada yada yada. Pooski actually got a ban for elo boosting. She was elo boosting or elo boosted and got in trouble, and that's why she didn't really stream, yada yada yada. And lo and behold, Voyboy was still playing the LCS, still doing his thing, didn't get in trouble, no fines, no punishments there. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on with that? Why is it that if I was playing somebody, if I was playing on somebody else's account, if I was playing on a friend's account or logged in somewhere elsewhere, I would be considered an elo booster. But if he's a pro player and he plays for League of Legends, why isn't he getting punished? And I'm not talking like he doesn't need to be banned from the game. If you want to change the punishment, if you want to reform him one way or another, that's fine. And I'm not just talking about Voyboy or Betsy. I'm talking about anybody in general that's in pro players and break these rules. Now, just do it. Something. And it could be a fine. It could be, a competitive play game, one day out. Or maybe he is banned from League of Legends, can't play on NA. Or, hey, maybe he's playing on EU West and he's banned from EU West because he was toxic on EU West. Whatever the case may be. But it just seems that when these systems roll out and these reform systems go on, and these posts make it to the front page, or even when they don't make it to the front page, and you read this, and there's chat logs, and you can just see, like, hey, people have been banned and people have been chat restricted for much worse. And here we have pro players, people that are you're representing your company, and players that play on your company are just toxic. And it makes me sad because, like I said, I'm a Gambit fan, and you have Betsy that was a pretty good mid laner in my opinion, and he hasn't had the best start this split, but he's in solo queue and he's supposed to be a higher representative. I know that's hard all the time because whatever the case may be on your mind. And you're just like, oh my goodness, this is what's representing your company. And here it's kind of ignored. It's kind of, Riot Lyte didn't mention anything, like I said. He probably saw the post. And there was several posts. It was reposted. So it made it to the front page. Also, you had people who just speculation, like I said, the Voyboy thing is more speculation, I guess you could say. Another one was I was watching some streams and there were diamond players higher up at elo players, and they're playing against a specific person. And they're like, hey, this person's playing completely different. They tweeted out that they were somewhere where the pro players were and could be dating one of these pro players, and they're playing mechanically much better. They're overall playing much better and better at what they're doing and playing all these different roles all of a sudden and can play this champion really well. And you're like, hey, that's situational. And it just kind of worries me about what the punishment system is and how the punishment system really punishes people. Like, does the bot like kind of ignore those people? Does it have to be dealt with people? Are they punished through the esports community that we don't know secretly? It kind of just throws me off. It just kind of throws me through a complete loop, and it kind of gets people, I think, kind of worried and frustrated because you're like, hey, we're people that play this game too. We're held up to these standards. We're getting punished by these standards, and we have these pro players. Like I said, if it be elo boosting, quote unquote, elo boosting, if it be toxic in chat, and then this is not the first time we've seen somebody toxic chat. I mean, Seversinskin, I can't say his name, I apologize. Last year at Worlds was racist. He got a 3-day ban. Was that justifiable? I mean, a 3-day competitive ban. What I mean by that is, was that enough? I mean, he was rude, toxic to the people that were hosting him, pretty much. And he only didn't play for 3 games. Was that justifiable? I don't know. And then you have other people that are punished and fined for, simple things in esports that fall down the esports line. So, do the esports rules negate that? Do they protect them from the Riot rules? Are the Riot rules in the esports rules? Some people would question that. So, all I wanted to say on this part was, if we're going to roll out these reform systems, if we're going to roll out one way or another these new ideas and these new codes for a reform system, then I would like to see the pro players and everybody held at the same standard, and it should be held at the same standard. And Riot then should address it in one way or another, maybe even punish them a little bit more because they're at a higher standard. And that's pretty much where I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to go too much in depth. I just thought it was kind of ironic that, Riot Lyte, announced this new reform system. People were talking about the chat bans, and all of a sudden, boom, Betsy comes up and he's very toxic. He's intentionally feeding when people say he's intentionally feeding. The reform system's getting made, and then Riot Lyte doesn't mention anything. His post disappears. Some random Joe Blow makes it to the front page, and all of a sudden Riot Lyte's boom. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm busy traveling, blah 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 blah. And hey, lo and behold. So I'm sure somebody tweeted at him. If not, I'll tweet it at him right now if you want me to. So anyway, guys, that is it. Overall, the reform system I'm kind of nervous for because there's really no statistical numbers. I'm not asking for the code. I'm not asking for Riot Lyte to release the code because I'm not going to know what the hell that is. I'm just going to ask how the system kind of identifies that. What does it go off of reports? Because he always talks about the system identifying and noticing its first potential feeder. But what is an intentional feeder like? Like I said, 0 and 10, 0 and 17, 0 and 20. How many deaths do you need to be intentional feeder? What happens if you're 1, 10, and 14? Is that intentionally feeding? I mean, you were in 15 kills technically, even though they were assists, but was that too many deaths? The chat ban restrictions, this has been in for a long time. Racist, rude, disgusting comments. Is that enough? Is that a chat ban enough? They still can play ranked. They still can be toxic. They can still type, a few lines. And it only takes one line to really be toxic. I mean, just make that one line really worth it, and then lo and behold, So that is it. That is my idea of the reform system. It's good intentions. I mean, it's an automated system. It's quicker responses. I think people like that. I think people enjoy the ultimately, quick swift response that Riot gives to those. And then, of course, you have those questionable ones that, hey, am I really toxic? This log doesn't really show me that I'm toxic. I don't know why I'm banned. And then Riot Lyte or whoever can come through and be like, hey, this is why you're banned. And lo and behold, back to what I was saying, the pro players, why are these pro players held to the same standard? How does that all work with that? Because I find it really interesting. Like I said, it's just Betsy, and I'm not trying to pick on Betsy. This goes for anybody that's toxic or rude within the community, and say, hey, why is he not in trouble, but we're held at this standard? And if we're held at the standard, he should be held at that standard, or even a higher standard. And it's just kind of sad day. But I'm not going to keep any more of your time. I know I've ranted for almost like 27 minutes now. Thank you so much for watching. And, if you have any ideas or suggestions about the tribunal system or revamping the tribunal system, leave them down below. If you don't like how rule or the automated system works or think that it's too vague, I know I could go into the wording. I should have said this way earlier, but I can go into the wording and we can look at the specific wording and then look at the chat logs. And I could go into that depth. I know it's not the best wording, and this goes right hand in hand to the Reddit rules that I talked about last week. We need to be more specific on what we consider racism. We need to be more specific on what we consider toxic behavior, rude behavior, disgusting behavior. And what do I mean by that? Like I said, be more open about it. Just be like, hey, racism is this, or we specifically target that, or specific words target this. And then you look at chat logs, and if they don't fall down that line, like I said, it's kind of gray area. You're like, they're not really toxic. And then again, like I said, the system doesn't really pick up the best logs. Riot Lyte has admitted this. He said, hey, the system does not a really good job of notifying you where you were toxic. It kind of just picks out a log. If it be you were toxic at that time, or if you weren't toxic, here's the log, right? And it's kind of like I said, you get kind of bad logs. Some people get really good logs. So ultimately, it's not a good thing. But anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.